Hey there, Transformers. Welcome to Work Transformed, the podcast that tackles the ever-evolving world of product development, project chaos, and everything in between. Each episode, we'll dive into the hottest trends, unpack the latest tools, and chat with inspiring guests who are leading the charge. So, buckle up, get ready to transform your work, and let's do this.
Hey, Transformers. Welcome to another episode of Work Transformed with your incredible host, me. And I also have another incredible host, Thomas Lenore. So Thomas Lenore and Jackie Bittner on this podcast, as we usually are.
I see you trying to steal my thunder as the favorite host, but I like the fact that you've distinguished yourself as an incredible host, and I am the favorite.
You can still be the favorite. Yeah, see? I am trying to make space for all of us. All right. On this week's episode of Work Transformed, we're going to talk about the power of feedback. Thomas, I'm just going to say the impact on me when you're eating donuts on screen is jealousy. And I would really love it if you could also bring me some donuts.
Well, thankfully the donut is gone, and so now you don't have to feel that jealousy because the opportunity is passed.
The donut no longer exists, so I will not get it. Oh, we can add that sound in. All right, so we're going to talk about the power of feedback, and I think we could probably go in many directions as we usually do. I know that we've talked a little bit about feedback in the past, especially when it comes to growing and developing a team. I think feedback goes a little beyond just your team, and it can go to other individuals that you work with in your organization, to people in your everyday life that you want to tell something to that maybe is bothering you. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to dare say, as a culture, maybe we're not great at giving or receiving feedback just as a people in the world, because it comes with a lot of emotions tied to it. And so what are some good ways to give and receive feedback?
Jackie, I dare say that we're not, as a society, good at receiving it or giving it, frankly. People are scared to give it, or people who are not scared to give it are just not great at giving it. And so, I think there's a lot of problems in terms of feedback. And I think that's why feedback is so scary. We think about often mid-year and end-of-year performance cycles. And I know a lot of people go into those with so much anxiety and so much trepidation. I think that's a little off topic, but it even reminds me of some of the direct reports I've had in the past who, as the manager, and I shouldn't say, feedback and end-of-year reviews can be done any of a number of ways. But in the majority of the places I've worked, there's usually this self-assessment component that comes first. And then the manager can review that with their own observations, assessments, and all these things, and write the manager's perspective. And I always, 100,000% of the time tell my direct report, please don't write a novel. I know what you've done all year. I've been very present. We have conversations every week or every 2 weeks or whatever the cadence is. I just need you to give me a high-level summary. Think 1 to 2 paragraphs, and And I can see the anxiety manifesting in the way they do these self-reviews, because then I have people who list out literally a novel, pages on pages of stuff, because I think innately within us, we're like, we need to defend what we've done. We need to defend this. We need to, show our value. And I will be honest, I do always read them. But I'm always reading them I really wish this person hadn't written all this. I agree, I knew this, I wish they had to summarize. And so I share all that just as a long way to say, I think feedback is always scary. And so to defend ourselves, we write a novel so that you can't refute that we did all these great things. But why do we even feel like we need to do it?
I think that's so interesting. I think that's so interesting that you were talking about these self-reviews, and you used the word that I was gonna dig in on, and that is they read defensive. You're already on trial for something, and you just have to say what you did, and so to your point, why is feedback scary, and why do we avoid it all the time, or some of the time, or it kind of goes with, it loosely ties with conflict resolution. Some of the feedback you're going to give to people may not be because they did a great job. It could be because there was an issue or a challenge or a problem. And so that already feels Like, you could
Well,
potentially get
it,
into defense mode
yeah,
if you feel
it's
attacked,
interesting
right?
you say that because I'd imagine that that's actually a lot of people's first uh, inclination. Their first thought is, I should get feedback because this person did this thing poorly. And I'd actually posit that it probably would be even better if we started as, I should give feedback because this person did this thing well. And it would probably make giving negative feedback and receiving negative feedback slightly easier. Because when you hear the word feedback, it almost always in your mind is, I'm getting critiqued or judged for something I did poorly. Because so few people say, hey, can I grab 15 minutes on your calendar, and then ambush someone and say, hey, I got some feedback. Are you in the place ready to receive it? And they say yes. And you're like, I just wanted to let you know you did an amazing job. I was so impressed. I got nothing but kudos. Thank you so much. When was the last time, just as a listener, when was the last time someone asked you, could they put 5 minutes on your calendar to give you some feedback, and then they gave you the feedback that your presentation was life changing, or that your comments in the meeting really helped to move things forward, and they really appreciate you and value having you on the team? Like I have absolutely experienced that in my life. I don't want to say, I don't, but like it's even hard for me to close my eyes and say, like, the last time that happened was this time. But I can definitely tell you the last time I got some negative feedback. Like, that is quick and easy to remember because it happens. I would say it's proportionally outweighed by negative feedback.
That's an interesting thing too. I will say, depending on your company culture, like, I've been in organizations where people would do that. Like, they would like connect and say, I just wanted to tell you that forum was amazing. You asked some really great questions, and thank you for capturing these actions. We finally made traction on the XYZ thing. And to your point, maybe feedback needs to be all about balance. If you can get some good stuff in there, it then makes the not so good stuff a little less intimidating or scary. I had this other thought about feedback. So we've talked a little bit about mostly, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, managing a team and doing feedback, right? You talked about the self-reviews as part of the performance assessments, and then we've been talking a little bit about more broadly, just people in general saying, hey, can I put 15 minutes on your calendar? And I took that as a, manager to employee kind of 15 minutes. But I know that there's so many other opportunities to give and receive feedback. Like, those need to be done well, the manager-employee one. And vice versa, right? That an employee should feel good about giving a manager feedback. I know as a manager myself, I made a user guide for myself, the Jackie user guide, and feedback is important to me. And in this thing, I set the expectation is that I would love to hear it. Just ask me if I'm ready first, right? To prep my brain. But like, how do we do that outside of the teams?
Hold on, don't gloss over that too quickly, because whether it's manager to employee, employee to manager, peer to peer, I think, not I think, I know that there is value in asking for permission and readiness to give feedback. Because if I just left the meeting and you're giving me, especially if you're giving me negative feedback, if I just left the meeting went poorly, I probably have some level of self-awareness and know the meeting went poorly. I'm frustrated, I'm anxious, I'm feeling all these emotions, and then you pull me into a meeting room or a Zoom room or whatever and say, hey, want to give you some feedback. This is what you should have done better. Like, I'm already upset, and that's just making it worse. So sometimes you have to ask me, are you in a place right now where you can receive the feedback? And you have to be absolutely okay if the person says no. And if you could just, save it till tomorrow, like, that would be helpful. Because once I go to sleep, I come back, I have my coffee, like, I might be better able to receive it. But in the moment is not always the right time. But you have to weigh that because maybe this is something so urgent that you need to share in the moment. But again, if the person's not in the place to receive it, they're not going to receive it. So just make sure you're asking for that permission and then being in tune to the person's desires.
You're absolutely right. If somebody isn't ready to hear it, it's just going to exacerbate the situation. Or if it's bad feedback, it's going to make it worse. Or even if it's good feedback, like, they may want to be present for that good feedback, but they're distracted because, like, the school is calling and the cat jumped into the sink and you're like, I'm not ready, like, or whatever crazy scenario you may find yourself
I can
in.
absolutely see what happens at your household. The cat jumping in the sink and the school's calling every day. Something new's happened.
They're just calling me. I did this thing, just thinking back, like, as I joined new teams and became people's managers and people didn't really know me, I would do like a get to know you kind of session with the IDP, of course. But one of the things that I asked was, how do you like to receive feedback? Meaning, do you want to know as soon as it happens so it's fresh in your mind? Or would you prefer me to like Slack message you first so that you have a minute to kind of decide whether you want it or not? Or are you a person that always needs a day delay? Like, let me know. And that way I can honor your best way of receiving it. And samesies, like they know me, they know mine. I want to hear it, but like also ask me first. And if I say no, just be cool with that. So yeah.
That's such an interesting perspective because even in you saying that, as I sit here and I think I'm a always want a day person. Whether it's good or bad feedback, I always want a day. And I'm actually unless it's like super urgent, like we had a meeting today, I went poorly, and then we have another one scheduled in a day or two, so you need to give me the feedback in between. Unless it's like super timely, I almost am like a one-on-one person. Like, let's talk about this in my one-on-one. So even if it's constructive feedback, I can have the time and the space. So I know we have this 30-minute or hour slot allotted. I can dig into it with you. You know, I knew that wasn't the right thing to say, but I didn't really know how I should have traversed. Like, do you have feedback? You know, how I should have approached that? And like, I knew we had the time and the space. So I think that is an awesome question. And I expect some people will say they don't know and they don't care, and that's fine. But like, some people will know. Some people absolutely, like, I know what kind of person I am, and I can't receive feedback in the moment.
I think that's also good to call out, is sometimes people don't know. And that's what the value of asking is, because maybe they aren't sure and they're still learning about what they like or what they prefer. So good. It's such a good thing.
I interrupted you though, because you were on your way to, I think, talk about the value of peer feedback and how important that can be in just helping folks to develop and evolve. But I stopped you.
I was, but no, you stopped me with good purpose, because that was a really good, really meaty discussion there. I was going to talk about the opportunity to give feedback to peers, or, you know, even like different levels of humans that you work with. And I was going to say, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've had scenarios play out where like somebody that's not on the team would ping me to tell me that they had feedback about one of my employees. And I would listen to the feedback and, you know, make some assessments on, is this feedback they can action on? Is this good feedback? But then the question I always asked back was, oh, did you tell them? And almost 100% of the time, maybe not quite 100%, was no, I didn't. I thought you would do that. And I always took the stance of, I think there's an opportunity here for you to give them this feedback in a very calm and neutral way.
Yep.
Because if you are the one that's giving it, there's an opportunity here to build trust among each other, right?
Absolutely.
Or to make a more strong, very strengthened relationship.
I wish the people could see what you just did with your hand.
My hands are just connected in a strong relationship. You guys, you should do
way.
You know what we should do? Total side note. As like a really fun, like special podcast, is do a video recording too. And just like
I think that would be very embarrassing, but people might like it. Just I mean,
it could be great. We could probably learn a lot about ourselves if we did that. Oh, y'all could give us feedback.
Topic,
yeah.
I agree. I think it is so important, and I'll give some specific examples. But I think it's so important that folks feel empowered to give this feedback to their peers, because I'll give a lot of examples, one including myself. But one of the challenges I had as a manager once was I was working with this person who people felt was very domineering, very difficult to work with, was not and the exact phrase that multiple people used was that they were a taskmaster. They weren't invested in supporting the team to get to the goal or, you know, hit the objective. They were all about, we said we're going to do A, B, and C. What's the status on A? What's the status on B? What's the status on C? Even if by being involved with the team, you could tell the C was no longer relevant to getting to the goal anymore, because like now we found a different path. It's just like, well, we said we're going to do it. So like, what's the status of it? And it's like, it just came across as not being a team player. And so multiple people gave me this feedback. And each one of those people was like, I just came to you. I just wanted to share that with you as his manager. Maybe you can give more coaching. And every time I asked, did you give this feedback? They were like, no, which was a challenge in and of itself. But the problem was when I gave the feedback, it caught them so off guard. They were like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't have that experience. No one said that. And I'm like, no, multiple people have said it. Multiple people said it directly to me. And then they felt A, betrayed, because like, why did the people not tell me? And B, they kept asking me for examples that I didn't have because I wasn't there. And so I was like, this is what the person told me, but I don't know. And they were like, well, how could I have done it better? And I was like, I also don't know because I wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like I gave, I don't want to sound like I was an oblivious manager. I gave some basic coaching and feedback, but at the end of the day, like in these specific situations, I couldn't tell you what you should have done better because I didn't experience the situation the way those hurt people did. So absolutely, if you're having a challenge with your colleague, your coworker, your peer, you don't have to be in a position of authority to be able to say, hey, Jim, just wanted to give you a heads up that they sent a couple emails out and they were so vague that I really didn't understand the actual takeaway. I didn't understand the action. And that's that. If Jim is a reasonable human being, that's not going to hurt his feeling. It's just going to say like, "Hey, I need to change it." And maybe you can even say, "What would have been helpful if you had just a list of bullet points at the end with owner's name, due date, and actual assignment or something,
Right.
being as specific as possible and giving that kind of constructive feedback in a way that's like, I'm not trying to hurt you or demean you. I'm just saying what will be more valuable to me."
And is it Jim or James? I don't remember who our troublemaker
This
is.
is Jim today.
Oh, hey, Jim. All right. So, and if Jim gets this feedback and he does feel emotional about it, then I think, he can have that conversation with his manager later. Like, so-and-so said this, I'm feeling this way about it. And that manager could be that almost emotional support person to help him navigate through what was said and what the purpose of that conversation was. Because I think something that kind of like I've just been writing down little themes. I think when you're giving or getting feedback, you also have to be in this place of like emotional intelligence, like knowing that the feedback is not a judgment of your character. It's not a judgment of who you are as a person. Now, there are some people that give feedback that is like that, and knowing the difference gives you that empowerment to stand up like, well, how do I action on this? This is literally just who I am as a human, because there is bad feedback. I don't know if you've ever gotten bad feedback, but you said you gave that specific example of several people coming to you but not saying anything to your employee and they felt betrayed. Oh my gosh, I don't know if you've been in that position, but yes, you feel betrayed because you feel like you have a relationship with people that could just say to you, why did you send this email with all these detailed instructions? We're meeting on it tomorrow. You didn't need to send it. Or like whatever it is, right? And then the worst is when it gets to that manager who doesn't have the context because they weren't there. And then they try to give you the same feedback that's not actionable. Like that's the other thing. If you are giving or receiving feedback, you should be able to figure out what your next action is with that feedback, right? Being able to either improve something or add bullet points to the email or, I don't know, whatever that is, but getting feedback and that's why I made that comment earlier about when people come to me, I first make a determination, like, is this feedback actionable for my person? Because I've had people come to me, give me some feedback, maybe they're just venting, and I never say a word to my employee because it's not helpful feedback. It's not actionable feedback. It's not going to make them do their job better. Like, so I just take it, go. And I think,
talking about powerful questions, that's one of the questions I actually ask when people give me feedback about my direct reports or even an indirect report. I'll say either A, what would better behavior look like? Like, what would you have preferred to see them do, or how would you have prefer for them to respond? Or I'll make them be in my shoes and I'll say, okay, now that I have this information, help me understand what your expectations are for me how would I use this? What are you expecting to see me do? Or how are you expecting to see this information used? Because sometimes I've had a couple people even respond to that and say, I just wanted to make sure you're aware because I've already given this to them multiple times. I want to now have it on your radar. So it's not, I want you to necessarily go speak to them. It's just like, now I'm expecting that you are noticing that there's a performance concern. And that's fine. It's like, okay, now I, as a manager, am on alert that I will be more fine tuned and ask more questions to make sure this is happening. So I'll definitely turn it around sometimes. especially if you tell me you haven't given the person feedback. I was like, so since you haven't given them any feedback and they're likely unaware that this is a problem, what are you expecting that I'll do with this?
Oh my
Surely
gosh,
you're not
is it?
expecting I'm going to turn around and give them the feedback, are you?
Oh my gosh, it's like such a interesting thing though, how many people do not give the feedback to their peers but want you to do something about it. And I feel like 9 times out of 10, it always catches that employee off guard. And like, that's just a challenging conversation to have. And you got to lead with a lot of empathy, right? And be like,
so, I have my own personal story about that now. The time that I was that person.
Oh,
I
let's talk about it.
It's interesting. I worked with a guy who was a tyrant. I don't say that lightly. He verbally berated people. He was dismissive. He was condescending. And like these were not like micro level things where it was like kind of condescending, borderline aggressive, like very aggressive, like that's not a good idea. We don't need to focus on those kind of things. I don't know why operations is commenting on something that's a product concern. Like just saying things like, you shut your mouth, I'm the one who knows. And like very aggressive. Like a couple times he did say things like something was stupid or just like totally unacceptable conversations. And so the problem was it got to be so excessive that like it was well known. Like this was this guy's brand. Like it wasn't kind of like that. It was like when this person set up a meeting, it was like, oh boy, we're gonna get berated. Like people were like finding reasons not to be available. And I knew like it had happened directly. It had happened directly with me.
How collaborative. This person sends a meeting and people are like, no, I'm out. Like what a good
spot. Like people would collaborate to like create a meeting that really was real where everyone else was unavailable. Like, oh, that's this other thing now. I can't come. I know my calendar was empty, but now it's all of a sudden full. But, okay, so let's fast forward to how I get involved. So this happened directly to me for a period of time where like the person was directly berating me. And Jackie is slacking me on the side. And apparently this has now happened to me twice in my career because the person that Jackie thinks of this is not the person. But now that she said that, this is true about that person too. But no, this is a different person. Jackie does not get the point. It's not that person. But the person did it to me. And then I moved into a different role. And so like my direct reports became like I don't know to say victims, but that's really how I feel. They were the victims of this.
Oh and my!
I never once addressed this person directly. Never once. And I didn't even realize that until I was having a conversation with our head of people or head of HR. And it wasn't a conversation specifically about this person, but the conversation was around how do we change company culture, where some of the barriers are, et cetera. And I was like, hey, some of the barriers are like, we're tolerating it. Behavior that's unacceptable, and so that makes people feel like we accept it. This is how bad the person was. The HR person knew exactly what I was talking about. They're like, well, are you talking about this person? I was like, yeah, that's an example. And they're like, well, what have you said to them? Like, what is their response to your feedback then? And I was in awe. A person who evangelizes the power of feedback had never given that person any direct feedback. The only feedback that I could point to that I gave was feedback in our annual performance review 360 program, where I let them have it. I was like, and this and that and this other thing. Even that like could have caught them off guard because I had never said it verbally. And it took me a while to realize why. And I think the challenge was because of how aggressive that person's personality was, I feared how could they possibly receive this feedback from me? Like, I didn't give them the opportunity to prove me wrong either, but like, I was like, oh, they'll never be able to hear this. And so in my mind, I was like, I can't give them this feedback. And I don't know where that came from. And it had not been something that like had been a approach I'd had in the past. But this one time, I really just didn't do it. And it wasn't until that person asked, like, what feedback did you give and how have they responded? That I was like, darn, I haven't given them the opportunity to be better. I haven't really approached him like a pure human and he said like, hey, this is what you've done. This is how it makes me feel. And this is what I would have expected in this situation instead.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, to be fair though, there are some things tied in there. Like you said, how aggressive this person was, like it caused this like fear to pop up so that you weren't able to give them feedback because there was like honestly like a safety fear. Were they gonna come at you with a machete? Probably not. But like
we're not. Thankfully, we're in a not a verbal, a virtual world. So like, no machetes coming out.
But I think that that like ties into like just general psychological safety when you're dealing with people that you're working with in forums, in feedback sessions, in whatever, what have you. And that's why I'm going to tie it back, that value of asking permission or seeking to like at least say I have feedback that I'd like to give you. Like it's so important because that tyrant person, you might have said, I would love to sit down and just give you some feedback and just come from like to tell you where I'm coming from, which leads me to impact feedback, which I gave you early on about the donut. Like if you could take some of that feedback away from like the you, like, you are a tyrant. You always call these meetings and yell at everybody. You never follow up on your follow-ups. You know, like that is very aggressive and very attacking. But there's like a way to soften it. And that is like by doing this impact feedback. That's like, hey, when this happened, here's what happened with me. And here's what I'd love to see change differently. Like, hey, Thomas, when I see you eating donuts on screen, I get so hungry. And then I start to get hangry. And so I wonder if you could maybe bring me a donut or maybe turn your camera off. Like, honestly, donuts don't bother me that much. I just, was jealous and that's fine. I'll work with that. But you get the idea is that a lot of this stuff all comes back to like building trust, coming from and being brave. We talk about that a lot too.
Well, one thing that I think the impact feedback format really helps you with is minimizing the chance of conflict as a result of giving the feedback. I often tell my direct reports, this is one of the best formats of providing feedback because no one can dispute how something made you feel, how you reacted, how you internalized or received it. Now they can say that was not their intention. They can talk about the how they gave the action or response or comment, but they can't argue with how you felt about it because the feeling is personal. And so I always say, make it real for you. Don't say you should not have done that. You should just say, when you did that, unfortunately, it made me feel like the work that I had done was worthless. And so, obviously I try to do good work and I don't like to feel that way. And so going forward, maybe if you have challenges or questions about the quality of my work, you and I can chat before we get to a more public forum or whatever. Like that way, it's like, I just want you to know how I'm feeling. And some people I know are listening to this, like, I would never tell someone that made me feel sad or it made me feel this way like that. So I don't know what word they're using, so I'll just use the word weak. But I think that's a challenge. Why do we think when we come to work, we should turn our emotions off and be robots? I also made a comment to my wife today, Jackie. I was like, I think Jackie hates robots. Because we were listening to a podcast and you're like, well, we're not robots, at least to my knowledge. And you don't like these robots.
That's a Jackie saying, right? We're all humans. We are not robots. I don't hate robots. Like I talk to my chat GPT like it's a person. I say good morning.
Okay.
I say thank you. I say please, like.
But to that point, but like, why do we think we come to work and we should turn off our emotions and we can't feel sad, we can't be embarrassed, we can't be frustrated? Like those aren't emotions we can use. Like I don't understand where that idea came from, because if we leaned into that, we'd realize that these things make us embarrassed or upset or frustrated, then if we do the same activities to others, they probably feel the same.
Right. And you can use like you said, like coming from this like neutral place, like you can use that impact feedback to like be observational. Hey, in the meeting when you like got really loud and said this was dumb, I noticed everybody shut down and stopped talking. Like observational.
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking that when you started speaking, I was like, we also need to tell them that feedback doesn't have to always be about us. Like we can give observational feedback about someone else. When you said that to Janice, I noticed her face, her facial expression just totally changed. I'm worried that she may have not received that the way you meant to give it or something. Like, we can get feedback on behalf of other folks. I wouldn't make it like my MO to be the feedback police, but like if something really you could tell it was bothersome in the meeting and you're worried that person may not say anything, you can definitely give that feedback on behalf of someone else.
I want to go back to what you said about like, why is it that for some reason, or how did it maybe it became this way, that when we get into the office or get into our job, that suddenly we're supposed to be void of emotions. And I will say, I think that the tides are changing in this arena and we're all becoming a little more open to the fact that people have emotions, number one, and mental health and things like that. But I have a story
Is that a new
about
revelation? Like people are just learning that these emotions exist?
Did you know? I don't know. Some might be. But like, I just have like a personal story to share, and it's not my story to share, so I'll protect the innocent. But when I worked at a place, and they have like long since taken this off of their review like process, but one of the categories that you would get judged on was your emotional control. And it was...
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's super oddly worded, right? But your emotional control. And I like, this didn't even happen to me, and I feel like I'm a highly emotional human. It happened to a really good friend of mine where they got dinged in that department for being passionate about a situation. And like, as a young person in my career, I could not wrap my head around it. I mean, I remember being so aggravated by this thing. It wasn't even mine to be aggravated by, but I am happy to say that I have not seen that on a review, or I've seen like a lot of work going into leading with empathy instead of dismissing people's emotions, or providing space for people to have reactions. So like, I remember I got some feedback that felt like an attack of character, but it was not. And the person that was giving it to me was so on top of anticipating what I was going to need after I heard that feedback. Like, they gave me space to sit in their office. They gave me space to cry. Like, they gave me space to do all of those things. And then after I did all...
That's so kind.
It was so kind. And what it did was let me get to a place where I could take the pieces of that feedback that, in my opinion, mattered, and do something about the things that mattered without jeopardizing who I am authentically, right? Like, so it was a tough feedback, but it was, I could say that experience could have been worse. I could have got dinged for emotional control in my performance review.
That's so that brings up a whole nother topic that I won't get into too much, but just like, as someone who gives feedback, I'm thinking from more so the manager's perspective, but it could happen on a peer-to-peer level as well. You also have to be ready for what might come with the feedback. Because I've given people feedback and they've literally started crying, like immediately crying. And you don't know the personal struggle someone has, the self-esteem issues they may be struggling with or battling with, what's going on in their personal life that's impacting their professional life, or frankly, how inferior they may feel in a role. I had someone who was like crying their eyes out because in their mind they were doing everything they possibly could and getting every single thing wrong. And they're just like, I'm not good at this. And it was so interesting that they said that because, yes, I had just given them some constructive feedback, but it was constructive feedback in the sense of like, I know you and I know you could do this better, not you are a horrible human being, you're doing a horrible job at this. And I actually thought they were doing a great job with a new role that had like a huge uphill learning curve. And so, in my opinion, I was doing them a favor, saying like, hey, in the future, here's how you can do this better to like help with the learning curve. But I guess they received it as, here's another thing you're doing poorly. And they lost it. And so you have to be ready for that, like to navigate those things. So just as much as you're checking in with other people and saying like, are you ready for in a place where I can give you this feedback? Are you, as the giver of the feedback, ready and in a place to support them if they need you? Do you have examples available readily? Do you have the time on your calendar? Because it might be a 5-minute call, it might be a 30-minute call. You don't know. So like
Yeah.
you have to be just as ready as the other person.
I think the examples or the observations are so important to tie it back to,
Absolutely.
like, this is what's happening. I'm not, like, I don't hate you. Like, I don't, there's like a lot of people that like struggle with like feeling accepted, and like getting bad feedback could make you feel isolated, right? Like, and you don't want that. It's all about, I guess there's like you said, and we can't we can't give the advice to say, make sure all your people are telling you where their head's at 100% of the time, so you know when you give feedback if they're going to have a meltdown. That's just not realistic or appropriate. But if you are a good leader and you've established trust and you've established openness, like, I know that I do this with my managers. If I'm like in a weird place, I'll be like, I gotta tell you something that's like serious. It is not work related. I don't want you to judge me for it, but I do want you to know about it because I feel like maybe I've been dropping the ball lately, or whatever that may be. And obviously do that to your comfort
Absolutely.
level. But it's always worked out well for me to be that vulnerable with somebody I trust, obviously, like a manager that is a good manager. So managers, listen up. If you're a good manager, it gets easier. So stop being bad managers and be good managers.
Stop being bad managers. Yes, we need to get shirts that say that.
We should get shirts for our video podcast. It'll just say, stop being bad managers.
Well, that's my motto. My claim to fame. I shame bad managers.
Yeah, you do. You really, really do.
One thing that we haven't talked about that I think is essential to discuss is the
Yes.
compliment sandwich or the feedback sandwich, where you're like,
Oh.
oh, thank you for putting that meeting on the calendar. That was so helpful. I really appreciate it. I did not feel like it was very productive. I don't think we got a lot accomplished. But again, like you said, that agenda, I can get everybody in that room. That was a good first step. Thank you so much. And it's like, well, hold on. Did I do a good job or not? I don't even know, because you said you appreciate me setting up the meeting. The meeting was bad, but I sent the agenda, which was good. Like, what do I take away from this? And I think that comes sometimes out of this desire not to break people down. If I give you this potentially constructive feedback around the fact that the meeting was not as productive as it should have been, you're going to be devastated. So then I better tell you something good first, like ease you into the devastation. And now that you look like you're sad and you got the puppy dog eyes, I'm going to ease you back out of it by saying another complimentary thing. And like, that is not the best way to get feedback. And I see it a lot. I see a lot of compliment sandwiches. Even in like performance reviews, I see them a lot. But I am not saying that you can't compliment someone and give them constructive criticism in the same conversation. But I think you have to be very intentional, because in this example, it was very confusing exactly what the feedback was because it was so similar. So I think you have to be very intentional about like what the good feedback is. And I think they both have to be on similar levels of relevancy. Like, the meeting was not productive means that a group of 8 people spent 30 minutes talking in circles. That's concerning. You telling me you appreciate me for setting the meeting up, which took me 2 minutes, like, not on the same level of urgency. Like, I would not talk about that. I would just say, hey, I know you set this meeting up, and I do appreciate. Oh, well, maybe I would. Maybe I just like make it a thought. Like, I appreciate you for setting it up, but I really.
Sorry. How how did the compliment sandwich get its way into feedback? Because I feel like the compliment sandwich, like, its purpose was to like deliver bad news, maybe, but like, and I guess you could deliver feedback that's bad news, but like, I thought like the example that I've seen recently is like, if you have to bow out as a bridesmaid to a wedding for whatever the reason is, that you start with a compliment, like, I'm so honored that you want me to be part of your special day. This is going to be a beautiful occasion. And then like the bad news is like, I really can't afford it at this time. I feel awful and I'm super bummed. And then followed up with a compliment like, I would love to participate in any way I can help you. That doesn't require, me to be a stand-up. Like, I would love to like help plan a shower or like whatever that is. And like, that's just like delivering bad news in a way that it can be ingested a little bit better. But how did it get its way into feedback? I don't know. It did, though. It did. It's in there.
delivering bad news. It's like conflating a lot of things together. Like, I'm not a child. I can be Kyle. Like, you can't be a bridesmaid. You have no obligation. You don't have to tell me your honor. I mean, I'm not saying not some people this. I'm just saying you don't have to tell me your honors and all this stuff. Just let me know, like, oh my God, would love to do it, but I have another conflict. If it were any other day, I would do it without a doubt, but like I can't move this thing. Like, I think sometimes it's so intertwined and, like, I have to say this person's feeling when the information you're giving and conveying should be conveyed in such a way that it doesn't hurt someone's feelings because it's just so factual and it's providing with
Yeah.
enough information, you
Have you
know?
ever
And so,
gone have you ever gone to a meeting with somebody that you had to give feedback to and they were so aware, they already knew it was coming? Like, that's the best.
yes,
Is that
I gave a perform I put someone on a performance improvement plan once, and they're like, "Oh my god, I am relieved." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "I have been waiting for weeks." They're like, I know my performance has been going downhill, and I just have seen I've known this is coming for weeks, and I'm just so glad this day it's here." Not like I'm glad that I'm getting a performance improvement plan, but it's like it's kind of such a relief to not have to keep saying, "Are they gonna say it tomorrow? Are they gonna do it the next day?" I was like, I literally, like, my mouth was just hanging open. I was like, "I don't know how to respond to this." "Well, you know you're not doing a good job." And they're like, "Yeah, I do." And I think they were in a little bit of a funk, and they didn't know how to get out of it. And so, like, they were aware they could be doing better, but, like, they didn't know how to start doing better. So it probably was also a relief because they're like, "Now you can tell me explicitly what to do better." But, yes, I was in that position. They were like, "Yeah, I saw this coming. Thank you so much for delivering this."
right?
It's
I mean,
rare,
even
but they did
even
it.
when I go into things, I'll be like, "Yeah, I know I got a little heated in that meeting, and I probably need to apologize to some people." Like, it's like, oh, maybe that's emotional intelligence again, like being self-aware about what's going on around you and knowing again, not that people don't like you, it's that something didn't go well that you were supposed to take care of.
Mhm, absolutely.
Boom, boom, boom. All right, let's see. What
Ah,
else do we got in here? We talked about impact feedback, talked about confidence. Nope, compliment sandwich. We talked about building trust by giving your peers. I'm doing a recap. I should stop it. It's your job today. Ooh, do you want to
well,
rock, paper,
no,
scissors for the recap?
no, because I can show you that I only to wrote down 3 bullet points and then stop. So it's
I gotta,
all you for
I
the
need to
wrap up.
teach you how I do the notes because if you looked at them, I mean, it would be a fun adventure game. It's like a choose your own adventure. Do you want to read top to bottom or do you want to go to the left-hand side and then down and then up again? It's like the craziest mind map.
Mhm. Well, the
Oh
last thing
boy.
I guess we can talk about is, who do you give feedback on? Oh, you have one thing you want to talk about too, but I'm gonna go first. How do you give feedback on the um results of the feedback? So if I told you the meeting was not well organized and I felt like we could have done things better, how do
Hmm.
you respond if the person starts doing things better? Like, how do you? Sometimes I think we miss that feedback loop where we go and say like, "Hey, Jack, I just want to acknowledge like this is where the positive feedback can come in." Like, "Hey, I just want to acknowledge. I shared with you a couple weeks ago. I didn't think the meeting was very productive, but these last three have actually been really productive, and I want to thank you for taking my feedback and using it." I think that helps make people feel better because I've had times where I like implement people's feedback, and it seemed like the people didn't know or were like it just seemed like no big
Yeah.
deal on their part. And I was like, I did this for you. Like you asked me to do this, and now you're not like, really engaged with it. And so, like, I think sometimes it's helpful to give feedback, even on negative feedback that you give that you've not seen any improvement on. Like, what do you do after that? Because you can only give the person the feedback so many times. I think that's an opportunity where escalation and going to the manager is appropriate. Like I've given them the feedback once or maybe even twice. I've not seen any improvement, or I've not seen the improvement sustained. Because there are a lot of cases where people will improve immediately but regress back to their former behaviors, and that's when you
Yeah.
probably do need to get a manager or a higher level person involved, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I agree. I know that like personally, like with my teams, if I've given feedback on like very specific things, and then I see them do the very specific thing, like if it's a meeting that I'm in that they're leading, I might ping them on a side and be like, this is excellent, exactly the improvement we were looking for. Or like some small way to acknowledge that I see you. Like, I guess that's what it is. It's the, oh, I see you've taken this feedback. Even if they took it and are trying something and it's not quite hitting the mark, you can say, hey, I see you're working at this. Let's refine it a little bit together. I noticed that XYZ is here and ABC is here. Let's put them all in the same column and figure it out, or whatever that is. Okay. I thought of something so important. And it has to do with giving and receiving. It has to be more about the receiving end of feedback, right? So what should you say after somebody gives you feedback? Do you know? It's not a trick question.
I feel like I do. Oh, well, I was going to say thank you, but I was like, maybe it's a trick question. I don't know.
You're correct. So when you are getting feedback and you have this awareness that you may get like some emotions might come up and bubble up, after someone gives you the feedback, before you even respond, because you want to listen to hear it, not listen to respond, the next thing out of your mouth should be, thank you for sharing that with me. And then you can digest it. And then you can come back and say, okay, this piece of the feedback that you gave me is not resonating with me. I don't know how this came to be. And then you could dig deeper. Do you have an example? Do you have, or whatever that is? But I say this because I do this with like my child, Radical. I will ask him sometimes, hey, buddy, how am I doing? How am I doing as your mom? You feeling good? You got some feedback for me? Like, what is it that you'd like to see change? And he'll legit tell me something. He's 4, so it's usually like, can I please have ice cream before breakfast? Or like whatever that is. But my response to him, no matter what it is he says to me, and Lord knows as a parent, your heart gets broken many times over by things your kids say, but you respond back in that neutral place and say, thank you for sharing that with me. And then you can come back later with follow-up questions or clarifications or your actions. What are you going to do now? Like, since you gotten this feedback, you took it very seriously. Here's the actions. That's why I get so mad when feedback isn't actionable. Okay, yes?
I love the idea of making it clear that you are listening to the feedback intently with the expectation of understanding and not responding. And we talked about this a little bit when we talked about active listening. But that is easier, obviously, said than done, because once your defenses start going up, you're like, that's not true. I didn't say. And it's like, let that wash over you. We're listening to hear. We're listening to understand. We're listening to be able to understand that person's perspective and understand how our actions or conversation inform that perspective. Again, everything someone says is not always true. Like, all feedback ain't good feedback. So I don't want anyone to walk away from this podcast saying like, oh, Converse and Jackie said we got to listen, we got to understand, we got to change the way we're doing it because they gave us the feedback. No, all feedback is not good feedback. Like, I've had people who were outside of my domain or my industry give me feedback on like something that is like industry standard. And it's like, well, you're just not familiar with this. And it's like, that's different. So like you listen to understand, and you're not refuting and rebutting every single point they make. And if you understand it well enough, you may not rebut anything. You say, thank you so much for that feedback. I completely understand what you're saying. Let me think about how in the future I can make sure that doesn't happen. And you don't need to make a promise that you're going to change your actions or that you're going to do anything in that moment, because maybe you don't even know how. But like, if I say, let me think about how I can make sure that doesn't happen in the future, that's a real action item, and it helps to let them know that like, I heard you. I'm not arguing with you, because the type of people I don't like giving feedback to are the people who I say, I felt like that meeting could have been a little bit more productive when we had an agenda and some goals at the onset to know, what we're trying to achieve. Well, I did say a couple of times that we need to really stay focused.
They're not hearing you. They're not hearing you.
What I'm saying is this. They're like, but no one else has agendas. Like, why would I waste time making the agenda if no one's going to? Again, I appreciate you for sharing that perspective with me too. But that's not what I'm saying. Like, I'd rather in that moment just say, let me think more about your feedback and how I can apply that in the future.
Yes.
And then take time to think about it, because
And then you
your
can come
argument
back.
is not fixing it.
Right, because maybe later you come back with a calm head and you say, Thomas, I know you wanted this agenda. I just, let me tell you, I tried to meet with these 4 people to get alignment on the agenda, and it was a mess. And that, like, you might uncover a different root cause, like, that you could tackle, right, based on that. If you take those moments to come back to calm, come back to neutral. Thank you for that feedback. Let me digest some of this. I'd like to come back to you with how I'm going to action on it, so. The power of feedback. That's the power of feedback. I realize we are very close to time. Shall I do the recap?
I'm done.
You're all done?
I'm done.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to take a look at this notes and do a recap on the power of feedback. So, power of feedback. Feedback is a super important thing that we've identified doesn't happen as often as it probably should, but that's because we have a fear about feedback. There is a big value in asking for permission when giving feedback to help kind of calm those fears and get somebody ready to receive it. And similarly, if somebody asks you, are you ready for some feedback? Be honest about your response. You may be in the moment ready. You may not, and it's okay to ask for a little bit more time. We talked a lot about feedback from the manager-employee lens, and how feedback can work well with performance feedback and things that you can do to ensure that you're aware of what's going on with your teams and they are aware of what's going on with you, and creating this kind of continuous feedback loop to each other that's open. And it's all built on several things. One of them is emotional intelligence, knowing how to ask and give feedback, knowing how to say thank you for that feedback and give pause to situations where there may be tough feedback is shared. And we also talked a lot about making sure that feedback isn't judgmental on that person. It is more factual and neutral. So being more observational, being more impact focused can go a long way when giving feedback, good or bad. We also talked about the need for balance, and maybe part of the fear of feedback is that not enough good feedback is going around. So give it a try. Maybe a challenge for this week or next week or whenever you are listening is to find someone that's doing something that you appreciate and give them that good feedback about what it is you appreciate and why. We also talked about working for tyrants and how when folks may come across as very aggressive and as very animated, that you might have this fear about giving feedback, and that totally makes sense. It relates back to psychological safety. You want to be able to give your feedback in a place where you're heard and not ridiculed. So just get ready and be brave if you do need to have some of those tougher conversations with some folks that may not be ready for feedback. We did talk about some strategies here. So we talked about impact feedback. When this observation happened, the impact on me was how you were feeling and how you interpreted it. And here's what I'd like to do in the future to mitigate that. That is a good method of giving feedback. We also talked about the compliment sandwich. Could be good when giving bad news, probably not as good when giving feedback, because you don't want to lose what the actual note of that feedback is in translation of those compliments. So maybe think about sharing them separately. Here's a good thing. Here's a thing I'd like to improve. Let's see. When giving feedback to your peers, know that this is an opportunity to build trust and to build that relationship to make it stronger. And that if you don't give feedback directly to your peers and you go to their manager, there is a good chance that that person may feel anger or betrayal as a result of it. So do some thinking on that, because we are still humans and not robots, and we care about each other regardless if we think that we do or not. All right. What did I miss, Thomas?
I think you covered it. You definitely got the 2 bullet points I wrote on my piece of paper.
I thought you said there were 3 bullet points.
Yeah, if you look at the paper, there are 3 bullet points, but only 2 of them have word text to it. The third one is just a bullet point. Oh, there you have it.
As long as I got the 2 bullet points that had words, thumbs up all around. That's it for today, Catalysts, Transformers, whoever we're speaking with. Have a good rest of the day. And we'll catch you on the next episode next week.
Cool as a cucumber, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.